Hi, I'm Nick,
I'm Luna,
and we are the Nomad Chitello YouTube channel.
and we are here tonight for a special live event where we will talk about food, my favorite topic, personally.
Now, we are streaming this live, but of course it will stay on YouTube. If you are watching this live, feel free to put in some questions in the live chat, and maybe we'll be able to answer them here, or maybe you're just watching the recorded version later. Now, we're not going to be recommending specific restaurants in Venice. What we want to do is recommend specific types of food because Venice is a very rich culture, specifically with seafood.
Yes.
And so when you sit down at a restaurant in Venice, of course, it is Italy. You can get your spaghetti pomodoro, you can get your lasagna, but there are lots of specific things that you'll see in a menu that you may not be familiar with if you haven't been to Venice or spent time here.
And also the translations are problematic at times, not very accurate, so we want to help you out and show you some of the favorites that we have here in Venice.
Yes, definitely looking at some of our personal favorites. Should we jump in and start talking about some things?
Yes, let's go.
So let's start with, you're sitting down at the restaurant, you're looking at the menu, what's the first thing you're browsing through?
Well, you will start from the antipasti, the appetizers. And our favorite choice in this case is the antipasto misto di pesce, the mixed fish appetizer, which is different in every restaurant where you go. So it can be raw or cooked fish, it could be cold or hot, there could be different kinds of shells and clams or actual fish. And so you might want to ask for details to the specific restaurants where you're going.
And it can be a little bit of a gamble in the best way because you're going to get a collection of just absolutely delightful different pieces of seafood. They're always going to be different from one restaurant to the next. Some will be common, some will be a little bit less common. But there's always going to be this nice, beautiful little variety.
Yes, absolutely.
Let's take another look at this clip, and maybe you can give us an idea of some of the things we're looking at here.
Okay, so from the left to the right, on the left you can see a scallop, capasanta.
With some zucchini on top, so you can't actually see the scallop.
Exactly. Then I honestly am not sure. There is some octopus. But I'm not sure. There's another kind of fish in the middle between the scallop and the octopus, and it's cooked. It's boiled fish, very delicious. And
the octopus is also, it's called polipo in Italian.
Polipo. And then there is a small coda di rospo, which is part of the fish that is usually grilled. And the last one is baccalà mantecato with polenta.
We'll talk a little bit more about the baccalà in a moment.
Yes.
But I wanted to mention the polenta. The polenta is something I've discovered in Venice. I don't know if it's from Venice, but I think of it this way. If you had a fish tank with a Venetian person in the fish tank and you needed to sprinkle something on top to feed them, it would be polenta. There's something about the Venetian people love polenta.
There is a kind of derogative term, but not really for people from the north of Italy, which is polentoni. People who eat polenta all the time. So that's us.
And you'll see it in a lot of things. It's kind of that standard, not quite a garnishment, not quite a condiment, but it's there with a lot of stuff. And there's the soft version, which is...
It's all polenta, yes. It's polenta morbida, polenta...
there's another type that's almost like a cake sort of thing.
So you could cut the hardest kind, and this kind that we had in the antipasto was the soft kind, but it's great either way, in my opinion.
And so there are other very popular antipasti, appetizers that you might have. The next thing that we wanted to talk about is the sarde and saor.
Yes.
So let's take a look at that.
Yes, we have some examples of dishes here that Nick will show us. And these are the sarde and saor. So they are sardines that are fried and then marinated for several days with onion, lots of onion, and lots of vinegar and oil. And the original recipe includes also raisins and pine nuts, so be aware of that if you ever order them. They are absolutely delicious. They are fairly easy to make, honestly, but it takes a long time, so it's easier to just go to a bar or a cafe and have them, or even from the supermarket, because you can find them in the supermarket ready to go. So they're absolutely delicious.
And this is one of those things, as an American coming to Venice, this is one of those difficult cultural barriers, because you'll see on a menu, you know, it may be translated to something like sardines fermented in onion. Yes, that's technically what it is, and that sounds terrible to somebody with a pretty boring American palate such as myself. But these are things you want to try and break out and try. You might not like it, but I think a lot of you will love them, and I absolutely love them. You know, this also may seem a little strange. Of course, these are the full sardine. The heads are gone, but you will, you know, bite and taste very soft bones in there. I know this sounds weird, it sounds bad, but it's honestly, one of my most favorite things here.
Like, a lot of people just cut them in the middle and remove the bones, so that's also a possibility to eat them. So you don't have to necessarily eat all of it.
So the next thing we wanted to talk about is the baccalà.
Yes. So this is the variety that we like. There are several different types of baccalà, but this is the baccalà mantecato, which means creamy.
Well, we should say, correct me if I'm wrong, baccalà translates to cod. It's codfish.
Yes, it's codfish.
But what we're looking at here is, you might call it a creamed cod, and it looks like a big mound of white stuff. It's a creamed cod, but it's fantastic.
And you just spread it on bread or eat it with polenta, of course.
Of course. We left a little space on this plate because usually what you're going to want to do is take a bit of bread. And this is just, you know, some bread drizzled with olive oil that we've baked a little bit. And then you would spread the baccalà on that. And in a few minutes when we talk about cicchetti, this becomes a very common option for cicchetti as well. But when you get an appetizer, often, you know, there's bread at your table, and this is how you would enjoy it.
Oh yes, that's one thing that we should mention in Italian restaurants, and also in Venice, of course. Bread is always at the table at any restaurant.
I think that's pretty standard for Italy.
Yes, yes.
And you can see we've added a little bit of black pepper there, which I think is the best way to do it.
And I don't know if I should say this because it could be illegal, I guess, but I was able to bring baccalà to the States in my luggage.
Well, that was in a can from the supermarket.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that's perfectly fine.
And that's also something that you can buy at the supermarket. So.
Yeah. Okay, so that is the baccalà. So that's our second antipasta. Of course, there are many other antipastas that you should try. You may be familiar with the salad caprese. Those are fairly common here, but that's more of a broader Italian thing. I think we've talked about here the specifically Venetian things.
Yes, I don't know. We don't have any footage of that, but the carpaccio is typical of Venice because it was invented here.
Yes, we should mention the carpaccio. Is that typically an antipasta?
Yes, it's an antipasto.
This is a very, very thinly sliced, uncooked beef that is a delicacy specifically from Venice.
Yeah.
So once you've moved past your antipasta, of course you order everything together, but once you've finished with your antipasta, or no?
Well, I think we still have
We do have more antipasti. Yeah. I'm sorry. So let's talk about, you're going to have to say it.
Gran seola.
Okay.
That is spelled with or without the V, as in the title. And it's basically crab meat from king crab, I think it's called. And it's served in its shell, and it's a delicacy that is served just like that. Crab meat with a little bit of salt and oil sometimes, or lemon, and it's a great antipasto, really tasty.
We just ate that one last night.
Yes.
Okay, so what's the next one?
The next one are the cicale in Italian, canocce in Venetian, and they are mantis shrimp. I don't think I've seen the correct translation anywhere yet, but yeah, technically they are the mantis shrimp.
And I do like to mention, if you're not familiar with the animal, the mantis shrimp, it's worth a little research because they are amazing. You may know the internet comic strip called The Oatmeal, and if you don't, you should look up The Oatmeal, mantis shrimp. He did an incredible long-form webcomic about the mantis shrimp and its life cycle and its superpowers, and it's incredible. And having read that and then coming to Venice and seeing, wait, I can eat the mantis shrimp? I can take the upper hand over one of the ocean's most powerful creatures?
Yes,
It's
you can.
incredible.
And they are served with just a little bit of lemon and oil, and they are boiled, and they taste like, yeah, it's a sort of shrimp.
Basically like any other shrimp.
Yeah. And I know, and you mentioned that before to me, that animals in Europe and in Venice as well are look a lot more like their original form.
That's a good point. When you see the sarde and saor, you can see the sardine. You can often see the animal there
Yes.
on your plate.
So it could be a little unsettling for some people, and I know I have friends from other countries that wouldn't eat the canocce because they look like scorpions. But if you can get past that, I guarantee it's worth it.
Excellent. And so I think those were all of our antipasti?
I think so.
Okay, I think we've got everything covered here. So now we're ready to move on to our entrees.
Exactly, the primi.
The primi, okay. And so, of course, you're typically going to see lots of your broad Italian options. But one of my absolute personal favorites, I have to get every time I come here multiple times, is what I would call the spaghetti di frutti di mare. Frutti di mare
There are
meaning
different
fruit of the sea. But I guess the more proper term is allo scoglio.
Yes, exactly, which is spaghetti and seafood.
And so what we're looking at here are several different shelled seafood. You can see there's a piece of a crawfish, I think, but also you see mussels, you see clams. And the big thing about the spaghetti alle frutti di mare is that you have to take a moment and pull all of the meat out of those shells. And then they'll give you a separate bowl where you can get rid of those shells. It takes a moment, but man, it's absolutely worth it. And you can see that the sauce, if you call it a sauce, is very light. Sometimes it has wine in it, but it's a very, very light tomato sauce.
Yes,
And you just end up...
with a bit of garlic.
Yes, garlic is
More
a
than a
big part of this, yes. So once you've cleaned all that, you have this incredible spaghetti with all of these bits of seafood mixed into it. And yeah, that's absolutely one of my favorites. I don't think this is very common. I've only seen it in one restaurant here in Venice and actually one restaurant in California where they cover it with the bread of a pizza crust. And so when they bring it out, they cut open that pizza crust and peel it back, and that's incredible.
I also only saw it once.
And that restaurant here in Venice has since closed. We hope we can find that again. But even without the pizza crust, the frutti di mare is incredible. Now the next one is... It's tough. When an American first sees it, it looks very strange. And I've actually had people, Americans in the restaurant, stop and ask me, "Dear God, what is that thing you're eating?" And what we're talking about is spaghetti al nero di sepia.
Yes.
Nero referring to the black ink, and sepia referring to the squid, the small squid that makes the ink. So this is a sauce made from the squid ink.
Yes. And it's absolutely delicious. You wouldn't know. It has tomato in the sauce. You can't see it because it's black. But yeah, it's absolutely delicious as well. And it has little pieces of squid in the pasta mixed in.
And it's, it tastes like a a sauce. It doesn't taste like, oh my God, this is a bitter ink or anything. Nothing like that.
But careful with your hands because it's really easy to.
Yeah, keep your napkin on hand. Make sure you've cleaned your lips. It does look a little strange, but it is fantastic. And so let's move on to another one of my favorites, which we've discovered has a seasonal variety to it, which is not surprising. We want to talk about tagliolini all'astice or tagliatelle all'astice.
Or spaghetti all'astice. There could be all sorts of pasta, but usually it's long pasta.
And the operative thing here is the astice, which is a lobster. So this is, again, a tomato-based sauce made from the meat of a lobster. And I say it's a bit seasonal because when you're here in the normal summer tourist season, you're typically going to see an actual lobster that they've cut in half, and then the pasta and the sauce are served over that halved lobster. And I think the reason that we're seeing this now as it is because you just can't get lobsters this season, so they may be depending on some frozen meat, but it's still fantastic. It's still the same thing. You just don't get that actual lobster cut in half in the actual pasta. Okay, so the next thing we were going to talk about is you could get a mix of fish as an entree, either grilled.
Well,
okay, you say it.
Let me correct you here because we distinguish between first and second courses.
Aha, okay.
And this is going to be a second course.
Now this is interesting because when the very first time I sat in a restaurant in Italy, I saw the menu and I thought that I had to order an antipasta and a first plate and a second plate. I thought you had to order all of these, but that's not the case.
You don't have to, no. Okay. We used to do that when I was a child, like the big family dinner at the restaurant was going to be one of each, but you don't have to, absolutely. You can choose one plate from any category, but usually the division is appetizers, and then first course is pasta based, and then second course is all the other entrees, meat, fish, etc.
Okay. So now we're into our secondi.
Yes.
And what I was going to say is typically there are a few different varieties of mixed seafood. Grilled is common and fried is common. And let's take a look at a grigliata di pesce, a grilled mixed seafood.
Yes. So as you can see, even just like the antipasto, even here you can have all different kinds of varieties depending on the restaurant. You can see in this clip that there is polenta served with your grigliata, which is very common.
Oh, that's the triangles of yellow.
Yes,
okay.
Exactly. And then I think I had tuna and not cuttlefish, but
I do see a shrimp there.
shrimp, yes.
I think another one of those crawfish.
Exactly, crawfish.
Was there salmon in there?
No, not this time, but there could be. There was another coda di rospo, which is a piece of fish that I don't know the translation for, but it's great. It's great.
Just these incredible variety of grilled fish. There's often common that you'll get a frito mista, which is a fried variety. We'll actually see a little bit about that later. But that's another fantastic entree or secondi. Now, this is one that you just introduced me to just last week, something called fegato alla veneziana, which, when you hear the description, is very similar to something that we have in America.
Okay, so this is, of course, served with polenta, as you can see. It's liver cooked in a lot of onion.
So we will have liver and onions on a menu in America, but this is something that is particularly the Venetians have some ownership over.
Yes, it's typical of Venice. I don't know the exact history for it, but a lot of dishes in Venice, like sarde and saor, like fegato alla veneziana, have a lot of onion because historically it was the best way to preserve food. So a lot of it was marinated in onions, and fegato is too.
And I found it to be, think of a very light, tender meat, and you don't have to worry about the bones.
Yeah.
Very good. Okay, so those are a selection of the entrees. Certainly there are others, but those are some things that we encourage you to try as you're looking through a menu in Venice, some incredibly delightful things that you'll only find here. Although there are some specialty restaurants in America where I've seen a few of these things, but not all of them. Good luck finding sarde and saor in America.
True.
Now, there's another thing that I think we should take a moment to talk about, which is not specifically Venetian. It speaks to the experience of somebody outside of Europe traveling to Italy and having food. And you may recognize this. Of course, this is a pizza.
Yes.
Pretty standard stuff here. As a matter of fact, this particular pizza is very middle of the road. It actually tasted a lot better than it looks here in this clip.
First thing I want to say, if you sit down at a restaurant and order a pizza, you're ordering a whole pie.
Each person gets one pizza.
Yes.
You never want to get a situation where we're going to share this. You would never in a million years say, give us a large pizza, half of it with mushrooms, half of it with peppers. That's just not a thing. When you order a pizza, you're ordering a thing for yourself.
Yes.
That's important.
And you can, of course, not finish it and ask for a box to take home. So that's perfectly normal.
The other very important thing, which is often a bit confusing to people outside of Europe traveling here for the first time, the pizza will not be cut when you get the pizza. You will have your fork and your knife, and you will cut your pizza, and you will eat it just like that. When I first came here and started eating pizza this way, I had this thing in my head where I thought, I have to eat everything with the fork and the knife, but that's not the case. It is not rude at all to cut out a piece, and then once it's cut out, pick that piece up with your hand. That is perfectly fine.
Also, if English is your native language, pepperoni means peppers in Italian. So the salamino is what you're looking for the spicy salami.
Think salami.
Yes.
Salamino. There's also a common pizza you'll see on the menu, diavola, Diavolo, like devil, diavola, which is just a pizza with spicy salami. It's the closest you'll get to pepperoni pizza. There's an insane thing, an American pizza is the one with French fries on it.
Of course.
Which is...
That's typically American, right?
I'm being attacked. There's lots of different, there's prosciutto e funghi. Prosciutto being a very thinly sliced ham, very specific to Italy. Amazing, just eat prosciutto by itself. And then funghi being mushrooms. So a thin ham with mushrooms, that's a great one. You can get a frutti di mare pizza. You still have to take the meat off of the shells, but yeah.
It's a lot of work. I've seen even fried fish on a pizza.
Okay.
Like, there's a whole world of
they,
pizzas.
They get interesting sometimes. And so you may be wondering, can I get pizza by the slice? And you certainly can. There is a bit of a culture of street food here. You can get pizza al taglio, which is by the slice, or what's the other?
Trancio.
Al trancio.
Which, in that case, it's usually rectangular, like baked pizza. So it's a different...
Aren't all the pizzas baked?
Yes, but not in the wooden oven. Anyway, it's a different variety, but still, it's square.
And then there's another option, which is it's really not common because it's a bit more particular to a specific chain of restaurants called Rosso Pomodoro, which is in the style of Naples. They make the Naples style pizza. I just really like it. You see this sometimes as street food. They call it pizza portafolio. It's a very small pizza folded in half, and it's that thick, chewy dough of the Naples style, and you just kind of eat that as a snack or a quick lunch. I really enjoy those as well.
Yeah. And these are great options, pizza in general, but pizza portafoglio, pizza al trancio. If you're on a rush, if you want to not spend too much on your meals, it's just a way of having a quick meal fast on the way. Yeah.
And another thing common to Europe is the kebab, and you'll see kebab shops, as well.
Yes, and of course, we haven't mentioned it, but there are fast foods. There's McDonald's and Burger King. If you prefer that,
if you need that,
feel free to. But maybe try something Venetian.
Now, since we're talking about street food, one other common street food thing, we mentioned a bit before, you can have a mix of seafood. And a frittura mista is actually a fairly common thing to get as street food.
Yes, and you can just go to these shops where they have express frittura mista ready for you to enjoy on your walk. Although we need to mention something since we're talking about eating and walking, you need to be careful. We have a bit of a problem situation here in Venice with seagulls. Seagulls are getting more and more aggressive, and on the one hand, it's a good news because it means they don't find as much garbage on the streets as they used to. On the other hand, they are attacking people on the street.
Literally grabbing food out of people's hands, and they don't pay any attention to whether they're biting your fingers as well.
Yes. So be careful when you're walking with food, like try to hide as best as you can the food that you have in your hands.
Be aware of your surroundings.
Yes, and if you stop and eat at a restaurant, maybe prefer restaurants that have some kind of cover.
Umbrella or a canopy
yeah.
or something like that. But back to our frittura mista that we have here.
Yes.
This being a common street food version of it. Tell us about why we have these sticks.
To pick up the single pieces and eat them and enjoy them.
So it's perfectly fine to pick them up with your hands if you want, but the sticks are here if you don't want to get your fingers oily. You can pick this up.
Because it's very hot.
Yes.
When you order it.
And once again, recognize what we're seeing here. This is a shrimp. You know, the full animal is here.
And you're going to eat all of it, by the way.
And you're going to love it. Over here we have individual sardines. Now the calamari are a bit different because those are cut into rings. Oops. But you'll also see pieces of fish and stuff like that. So it's just a delightful mix of fried seafood.
Yeah.
Okay, now I think we had this a bit out of order, but would our tramezzini fit into street food?
I would say so, yes. Tramezzini are another option for an easy, light lunch or a meal, and they can definitely be street food.
So we're getting that set so we can see one here. So what is the tramezzino?
So tramezzino, which allegedly was invented by D'Annunzio, the Italian writer, is a sandwich made of white bread without crust and filled with usually mayo and a bunch of other ingredients. It could be like in this case, it's ham and mushroom, or it could be asparagus and eggs, like in the second case. Could be vegetables, seafood, baccalà even, all kinds of different fillings. And you can get a couple of those and have a light lunch.
Just a fast little sandwich, which I do not like, but Luna likes, so she's going to eat those a little bit later.
And it's very cheap as well, because you can find them from €1.50 to €2-3, maybe 10 in Piazza San Marco, but that's Piazza San Marco, so it's a different story. But yeah, around the city you can find them very cheap and very easily.
And that's, I actually thought of something we should mention. Again, one of those things, if you're coming from outside of Europe, the places where you'll see something like a tramezzino is called a bar. A bar is not a place where you would sit at a bar stool and drink a beer, although it is extraordinarily common to get a glass of Prosecco or wine or maybe even a beer, but they're also going to have other things like the tramezzino. And another thing that's very common in a bar is the cicchetti, which is something that you've probably heard a lot about in Venice. It's a very famous thing in Venice. So tell us a little bit about cicchetti.
So cicchetti are the Venetian version of tapas. So basically, they are finger food, small bites of food that you can get around the town, and they are very cheap. You can go from 1 to 150, €2 a piece, and they're generally a piece of bread with something on top of it that you can eat in 1 or 2 bites.
And you can see often you'll go to a bar like this one, they'll be beautifully laid out behind this glass case, and you'll just kind of point out and talk to them, say, oh, I want 2 of these, I want some of these, and they'll make a nice little plate for you.
And there could be even warm cicchetti, like polpette, which are meatballs, or like, I don't even know how to call them.
I don't know if it's a cornmeal. It's a fried, doughy, delightful thing.
That it's filled with either meat or fish or vegetables even. You can have tuna polpette or baccalà polpette, or I think we had cacio e pepe in this case, for example.
Which is pepper and
a kind of cheese.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you can see a few polpette here. But the main attraction is often, when you think of cicchetti, you're thinking of a nice piece of bread with some delightful thing on top. I can see there's salmon, there's baccalà, there's a couple sarde and saor right there.
Yeah. And also you can get, which is part of cicchetti, but a little more complicated to eat. It's called mozzarella in carrozza. So this is a sandwich made with white bread, again, filled with mozzarella cheese and usually either ham, prosciutto, or acciuga, which is anchovy, like in this case. And it's deep fried, and it's absolutely delicious and boiling hot when they serve it.
Yes, something to be careful of. It's nice in the winter.
Yeah, it has just been fried, literally. And so, yeah, that's another nice thing to bite into if you're on a rush and if you want a quick meal.
Okay, so those are our cicchetti. Often you'll go to a bar, you'll pick out the cicchetti that you want, they'll make you a nice little plate, you can get a glass of wine. Sometimes you can stand at the bar, often there's gonna be seating outside, sometimes a little bit of seating inside. And then at night, walking along the street, sometimes you'll just see there's people outside of a bar and they're talking and they're having a good time. Maybe music's playing and wine is flowing and there's cicchetti everywhere, and it's just this great little socializing experience. Okay, so we've seen our antipasti, we've seen our main plates, we've even taken our little side trip into our street food. But then let's imagine we're back at the restaurant and we're coming up to the end and we want to talk about our desserts.
Yes, let's talk about dolci.
So I think one of the most famous dolci from Venice is the
tiramisu.
Tiramisu.
Yes, tiramisu. So it was invented, technically in Treviso, which is a town outside of Venice, but was part of the empire.
Venetian Republic, or Republic Empire.
Yes. And it's a layered cake made of cookies, coffee, and mascarpone cheese. Personally, I love the mascarpone cheese cream by itself, even without the cookies. And I have to be careful because I am allergic to alcohol in everything, drinks or food. And oftentimes the recipe includes a little bit of alcohol in the cookies. So I have to be very careful. Yeah.
And I, on the other hand, I'm not allergic to alcohol, but I find coffee disgusting. They are not kidding around with the coffee in the tiramisu.
Yeah.
It's strong.
There's a lot.
And we experienced something recently. You were having tiramisu. I was trying a little bit of it. Sure enough, way too much coffee. So I thought, well, I'll avoid, because you can see on the top you have this light dusting. So I figured I'm going to avoid the top because that's where the coffee is, and I'll just eat the cookie part. Turns out that is exactly the opposite. The dusting on the top is not the coffee, that's cocoa powder. The coffee is in the cookie.
Yes, exactly.
In the middle.
So if you do find a restaurant that has only the cream, the mascarpone cream, usually that doesn't have any coffee.
Okay, which by itself can be a nice little dessert.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. And then we had a little bit of video of one more dolci.
And this is very seasonal. It's the frittella. So frittelle are the typical dolce of Carnival. And this is the time because Carnival is usually from January to February, March, depending on when Easter is. And frittelle are translated as donuts. I think.
Well, ciambale really look like donuts.
Yes.
This, it's different.
The dough is
A bit similar.
it's similar to donuts. It's deep fried, and it can be veneziana, which is empty but has raisins in the dough, or it can be filled with crema, which is custard. It can be filled with chocolate, with Nutella, with pistachio, with zabaione, which is a custard that is mixed with a little bit of alcohol. So I'm not sure what kind of alcohol, but of course
Maybe
I
a
can't
rum
have it. Yeah.
would be my guess.
Yeah.
And do you typically have these with a coffee, with a hot chocolate?
Yes, it's a dessert. So yeah, you typically have it after a meal, or again on the street while enjoying the city during Carnival and the masks walking around.
We've been to some festivals where they'll have vendors set up with a booth selling things like these. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so those are, I think that's everything that we wanted to give specific examples of. And of course, we encourage you to experiment and try new things. But if you need a place to start, I think we've shown you some great places to start.
And just a quick tip, if you want to eat on a budget and save money while in Venice, follow university students and workers, because a lot of restaurants have fixed menus for, especially for lunch, and addressed to local workers that have to have lunch every day. So you can get very cheap meals with a fixed menu that can be a lasagna and secondo, for example, or something like that. And university students are on a budget by definition, so the areas around
I'm forgetting the name of it.
Campo Santa Margherita.
Campo Santa Margherita is where the students are usually hanging out.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of cafes and bars that cater to that kind of audience.
The thing that really impressed me, I noticed that a lot of restaurants have this system where if there's an employer and they have lots of workers in the area, the employer will go to the restaurant and work out some deal, and then they'll give these tickets to all of the workers. When you take your lunch break, you go to this restaurant, you give them this ticket, your lunch is already taken care of.
Yeah.
Which I think that happens occasionally in America, but then you're going to get a sandwich, maybe a cheeseburger. These people are having spaghetti a frutti di mare with the ticket that they got for their lunch. It's incredible.
We're not kidding around
Yeah.
when it comes to meals. Yeah.
But you can order that same lunch as well from the fixed menu. Even if you don't have the ticket, you can still order it.
Yeah. And we should talk about
The very important thing when you're finished with your meal.
yes.
The very first time, again, when I was in a restaurant in Italy, I ordered my food, I finished my food, and I sat there and I waited for the bill. And I waited, and I waited. And then I got onto chat on my phone with one of my coworkers who is Italian, who is back in California, to ask him, what do I do? Because they're not bringing the bill, and I've been here a very long time. So when you're in Italy and many parts of Europe, you must ask for the bill or they won't bring it to you. And I kind of came around to this type of thinking where in America, you go to a restaurant to eat. In Italy, you go to a restaurant to sit down and spend time with your friends, and it's catered. That's sort of the philosophy.
Yes.
If they were to bring you your bill, that means that's very rude. You have to leave, and they're never going to do that.
And that's a reason why they tend to ignore you if you have finished your meal, because you're not the waiter's problem anymore. So
It can be difficult to get their attention
it's a
to
struggle.
ask for the bill. And when you're ready, when you finally get their attention, which can be difficult, you say,
Il conto, per favore, or the universal sign. Right.
Il conto, C-O-N-T-O, il conto. So you're asking, please, we'd like the bill, il conto.
While there are other places, though we should mention, where you either go and pay and have your receipt and then you order, like some bars, some cafes do that.
You tell them what you want, you pay it, they give you the receipt, then you go to the guy who's actually making the food and you give them the receipt. That happens.
Some cafes. Other cafes will bring you the food, especially if you're sitting outside and getting a coffee or something, and they will bring you the receipt immediately and they will ask for payment immediately. But it will be very clear in that case, so you will have no problems just paying.
And if it comes to it, if say you're seated outside, because there's lots of outdoor seating, which is fantastic. If you just can't get their attention, you just can't ask for the bill, eventually it is okay to just stand up, walk into the restaurant, which will have a counter or a bar or something, and ask to pay there.
Yeah.
It's not rude, but it's not something you would do immediately.
Exactly, yeah.
I think that's our overview of Venetian food. Did we cover everything?
I think so, yeah.
Great, so make sure you follow our channel, subscribe and all that, and we're gonna be putting out more videos.
Yeah, and if you have any questions, as usual, leave them in the comments so we can answer to them afterwards. And yeah, follow our channel for more about Venice.
Thank you.